Once again, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Stuart with SAi, and today we will be having a webinar presented by Aaron Clapp on how to print white and metallic in Flexi. And Aaron is in charge of all training here at SAi. He has years and years of experience with Flexi and knows everything there is to know about it. And so today he'll be showing you how to print white and metallic, and then we will have a question and answer period after that. So if you have any questions, just go ahead and type them into the chat window, either about the printing or any other questions you've had about Flexi. Aaron can answer all of those. So let us know what you're interested in learning about. We want to make sure that these are valuable to you, especially during this time when there's a lot of difficulty and a lot of people are looking to use some of their time to learn more and sharpen their skills. So go ahead, and any questions you have during the webinar, if you think of them, just go ahead and type them in and we'll address those at the end. And one more thing, we will be recording today's webinar. So if you have to step out or you'd like to review this later or share it with someone, we will be recording it, posting it to our YouTube channel, and we will send everyone an email with the link to the recording so that you can watch it anytime you like. And with that, we'll turn it over to Aaron.
All right, sounds good. All right, so white, metallic, varnish, those are kind of all going to be subject for today's topic. There's printing white in the software can be, it's not a terribly difficult thing to do. There's just a few steps that you want to keep in mind and kind of know ahead of time so you can kind of get through the process successfully. So that's kind of our goal today, is to kind of simplify and make sure that you understand, or you know what the steps are that you want to kind of keep an eye out for and kind of look out for as you're printing white, or maybe some kind of underbase color, or say metallic, or a finishing varnish or something like that. So to first start out, we're going to kind of just go through how to apply all these different effects and what that looks like in the software. And then once we get to that, and we kind of explore that whole section, then we'll move on to the rip and print side of it and what settings we need to turn on for the rip and print. Because basically they'll be the same irregardless of what you're using in terms of underbase, or if it's a white, or you're doing a varnish. We'll end up using the same settings in the actual rip and print portion later. So I've got a couple images on screen here. I'm going to move this one out of the way for a moment, and we're going to focus on this one first, because we're going to talk about, the first one is doing white as an underbase. And we have two different ways that we can do this. We can do it as a solid or a variable underbase. Basically, a solid underbase is consistent of a solid coat of a single spot color, which is typically white, that follows the contour of the objects that you have selected or that are above it. This is usually always a 100% ink coverage on this case. So if we're doing a solid underbase can usually be the same size as the object above it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a square or a shape. It could be whatever shape you want it to be, in the case of like text or other shapes and things like that. It can also be choked down to fit inside the object, or it can be set to a bleed to extend beyond the object, so beyond the margin of the object. And usually this effect is typically generally used with things like vector objects and text. So you would have something drawn on screen, and you could, or some text, and then that's how you'd use this. Not always, but those are your most common. And then your variable underbase, depending on what you're doing, but this is typically used with bitmaps and gradients. The density of the underbase or the white will usually vary to match the image or the graphic above it or the gradient above. So this allows the color of the media to kind of show through behind a transparent area in a picture or in an image of some sort. So let's look at what the practical example of that looks like. So first of all, if we do, I'm going to draw a shape here just to kind of illustrate a point. I'm going to change the color to blue. So these are all going to be located under the effects menu. So if we go to the effects menu and we go to underbase, we can choose a solid or a variable underbase. And we can see here that we can make this apply to the shape itself. And that's kind of what I wanted to illustrate here with this particular vector object, was that if it's a vector object, it will follow the shape of the object. I can go bleed, or in this case, this is a bleed, or this is a choke, and then I can define by how much I want to choke it by. And then I can choose my color, which would be an underbase or a finisher. So in this case, we're going to leave it at underbase, and then we would apply that by hitting the green check mark to actually make that apply. So now when I zoom in here, this actually gets added as an additional piece of geometry or an additional effect to this object. This can be separated if needed. So if I select my object here and go to effects, I can separate the underbase and I can pull away the design away from the underbase. So you can see here that it actually creates an object underneath the object when we're doing an underbase. So let's take a look at the difference between a variable and a solid in regards to something that actually might make a difference. I'm going to hit Control and just drag over so it makes a copy there for me. I'm going to go into Effects, and I'm going to apply an underbase, solid underbase for this one. I'm just going to go ahead and apply. And then for this one, I'm going to do the same thing, Effects, underbase, but this time I'm going to choose variable underbase. For this one, I can choose a resolution depending on how I want that to be, and then apply. I can also decide what I want this to be in terms of if I want it to go beyond, or this one does not have a bleed setting, a choke setting, but just a bleed, so I can make this bigger if I needed to. For now, we'll leave it at 0, so it's going to be right underneath the object and hit apply. So what I'm going to do with both these objects is I'm going to select them, I'm going to go to effects, and I'm going to separate the underbase for both of these. And then I'm going to move the image below. So this may be a little bit difficult to see, but I can see here where in certain areas the color is reversed or it's mirrored in a way. So I have more density in some areas than in others. So in the darkest parts of my image, I have less ink being applied, and where there is more image or white, I'm getting more image or more white applied. So this, if you were printing on clear material, this would allow you to save a little ink if it's not necessary to print all that white underneath a darker color. But it will also increase the ink density in the areas where it needs it most. So you can kind of see the difference here of each one and what it's doing. So let's go to the next thing. So we've got white as an underbase. So that's how we can apply an underbase. We can do this also as a replacement color. So for example, if I have a shape and I want to apply an underbase to that shape, I can also do this. I can select an object and then simply go to my underbase color in my toolbar, or if I go to my fill stroke editor, I can select my underbase from here. And this basically, what this is Oh, what happened to my Flexi? Pull my Flexi back up here. So what we can do is we can simply replace that color with another color. So if I want to take that shape and just have it replaced by the underbase color, I can do that. So let's go back in here. And by default, my color is underbase. I'm not sure why, but so I can either select this object and select my color from here and just choose, and I'm going to close out this palette because I don't want it in there. Make this a little bit easier to use. Let's see here. There we go. I can choose underbase. This is basically underbase as what we call an underbase as a spot color. So essentially, we're just replacing this as a spot. I can also turn a vector object into an underbase by using the arrange menu. So let's take this image back. Let's change it to another color here. I can go to the arrange menu. I can choose underbase, and then I can say make underbase. And then I can choose my underbase color and click OK, and it'll automatically convert that into an underbase for me. So those are several ways of creating an underbase for printing white or whatnot. And we'll talk about in here in a minute how we would apply different effects to that via your printer. So for now, that's how you apply those. And let me pull in these other two images here in case I need to use those. All right. So the other is varnish or a finisher effect. So very similar to the variable underbase or the solid underbase is something like a metallic that you might want to put on top of it, or if you want to put like a varnish or some kind of finishing on top of your work, you can do that as well. So the way we do this is again, same principle. The finishing effect adds a varnish on top of the selected object, so you will see that visually on screen. It creates an extra design element, just like it did with the variable underbase or the underbase. The original color, the original color of the object that's underneath it will maintain, and that will be printed first. Then the varnish will be printed on top of it. If we set it to a finisher as a spot color, this will actually convert the object into a varnish, replacing the color. So depending on what you're wanting to do there, again, very similar to the previous one in terms of how that works. So the way that I want to do this is go back to my effects menu. And then instead of underbase, I'm going to choose finisher. And I can do one of two things here. I can do a rectangle finisher or a shape finisher. So I'm going to use this shape here again as an example because it's, let's see, I actually need to delete that because it's been converted to, so all right, I'm going to, oh, by the way, if you guys need to change the color, the default color of an object, click on your tool, click on the color, and then click off of it. And then when you click back on it again, it'll keep it. So now it's going to give me my orange instead of underbase. Okay, so we've got our color here. Let's do a effect and finisher and do a rectangle finisher. Now what a rectangle finisher is going to do is it's going to take your shape, the bounding box of your shape. So if I hit escape here and or undo, if I select this object, yes, it's a vector object and it has a boundary along the vector lines. But when I select it, you notice how the boundary is all the way to the edges of these little points. When I do a finisher, rectangle shape finisher, it's going to apply the finisher all the way to the extent of all the boundaries of the object. So this may be useful if you're wanting to apply a finisher to an entire object or an entire set of objects, and you want the finisher to fill in not just the objects, but you also want the finisher to be applied to everything in between it. So my example, I guess, might be maybe, let's just say, like a business card type logo. You may have several parts of the logo in this business card, and you want to apply that finisher on top of all of it so that you get a nice even coat of finisher. This would be the option that you would use. It automatically applies it. You do not have to do anything. You don't have to click the checkbox or anything. It just automatically applies it. And you will visually see on screen that you can tell that obviously there's a finisher on top of it because the color has changed slightly. And so that's kind of visually because there's an opaqueness to the finisher color, so it's actually visible on screen. So, but if this is a clear finisher or something like that, then obviously your color below it will be fine. I'm going to hit undo, and then I'm going to go to our next one, which is going to be our shape. Again, this one is pretty self-explanatory, but if we click Shape Finisher, it applies it directly to that shape. So we can apply a effect to a specific shape if we wanted to apply a specific finish to that particular design object. A good example of that is well, we'll talk about that here in a second. So the other way that I can do this is, again, very similar to the underbase. We can do the same thing by creating it as an effect or a spot color just by choosing it. So I can click on this and then just choose my finishing option, and that will convert that object into a finish. So now that object will be your finish. This will be helpful for applying this on top of a graphic or something like that. So we'll take a look at that, an example of that here in a second. One of the things that you want to notice, though, is that when you're doing a varnish or a finisher, you want to make sure and apply the overprint inside of the fill stroke editor. This is going to be important. The overprint is going to allow you to print on top of another object and layer the colors. If you have this overprint unchecked, and we're also going to check an option like this in the rip and print when we take a look at it, but you're going to want to make sure overprint is on, because if you don't, what'll end up happening is it'll print whatever color is on top, but it's not going to print the color that's below it. Now, typically, this is something you do want to happen. Say if you're printing like a decal and you have lots of different pieces and vector art objects that you've put on top of each other, you obviously don't want to print those in layers, colors behind colors. That's not how that would normally work. You'd want to print whatever color's on top is the color that you'd want printed. Well, in this case, because we're doing layers, we want to make sure and have that overprint on so that whatever color is behind it gets printed, and then whatever color is on top of it gets printed as well. So just a little checkbox. It's a tiny little setting. If you don't do this, it can cause some problems when doing a finisher. So make sure that overprint is checked. So what we want to do is we want to go back and take a look at the SAi logo here. We're going to use our finisher to create a finishing on this little logo here. So let's go to effects, or sorry, bitmap, and we want to turn on our bitmap toolbar, which is this guy right here, and we'll just drag it out. And I'm going to use my magic wand to select the area inside of this. I'm going to hold down my shift key to select the middle of that A there, and then I can increase or decrease my tolerance if I want to, depending on how smooth I want this and whatnot. So now that I've selected something, I can go back into my bitmap menu and I can click on the Convert Marquee to Shape. And now that's converted that object to a shape. So now that I have a shape here that I can select, I can do my finisher. So I can come down here if I want to, click on finisher, and make sure my overprint is on. And when I go to print this, this will print white below, which if it's white vinyl that we're dealing with, it's just going to be print. It's not going to print anything, and then it'll print the finisher on top of it. If this were a different colored material, then you'd see that come through or whatnot. So now that we know how to apply one, that's the easy part, just putting one in, deciding whether you want a variable underbase, a solid underbase, a finisher, whatever you're looking to do. Applying it's easy. It's just all under the effects menu. You can do underbase, finisher, or if you're converting an object to an underbase, you can do that here under the arrange menu. So now let's go to the rip and print. And this is going to be the most important part in terms of what's going to be available and what you need to do. So we're going to go into our rip and print here, and we're going to go to our color correction tab. So our third tab, and there's several different settings that we're going to want to pay attention to in here. They're extremely crucial to what we want to do. So the first one is right here. Ignore overprint must be unchecked. We do not want to ignore overprint. We want that to always be available because we want to print in layers. So we want to make sure that that's unchecked. The second thing is we want to check for the color mode on our printer. So in this case, we've got a VJ1628X, and we've got it set up to CMYK white. You've got CMYK metallic. You might have some that are white and metallic. So it kind of just depends on what you're doing. So I'm going to choose CMYK white. And then the third thing we're going to do is we're going to use printer spot colors, because this is going to be a spot color on your machine. So I'm going to check this box, click on the mapping button, and this is where you're going to see the drawing color or the spot color that's in the drawing, and then what color you want it to be replaced with. So in this case, I'm going to click it to spot white. Now, if you had a metallic, the metallic would show over here, and then you'd choose metallic from the list on the left. Or if you had an underbase, and depending on what color you're using for underbase, you do the same thing. So whether you're doing finisher or underbase or whatever, you're going to come in here and do that right here. So in fact, why don't we go back and just apply an underbase to this object right here, just so that we can see that. So go back into rip and print and click on mapping. We've got the finisher. Oh, you know what? I didn't hit apply. So that's my mistake. That's why it's not showing up. Apply. There we go. Now we go into mapping, and now we see our underbase and our finisher. So now we can, we can define those differently how we want to. Okay. So now that we've assigned the color to what we want it to do, this is the part that's going to be a little different depending on the machine that you have. And I've got a couple machines here I'm going to show you to kind of take a look at. So first of all, we'll look at this this Muto. The last thing that you're going to come into is going to be your driver options. And this screen is going to look different for everybody. So this is kind of where you'll just need to explore a little bit and see what options you have. A lot of this stuff is going to be printer dependent. So whether your printer can do this or it cannot. So you'll have different options in here. So in this case, there's a button that says white and metallic options. And so I can choose what I want to do with white and metallic. And I'm going to choose the option here under white based on what I'm doing. So if it's a variable undercolor, I'm going to put variable. If I want it to print as substrate, then I want to do it to print as substrate. Or if I want to do a complete undercolor, I want to do undercolor. Or if I'm replacing a spot color with this particular variable underbase, I can do that as well. So I'm going to make this match what I'm doing in my design. Then, in this particular case, I have a print count. So I can print it once, twice. I can do as many different, I can put on several hits. So if I'm printing on black, I may need to do black material. I may need to do 2 or 3 hits versus maybe just 1 or something like that. And then we've got some other things here. So this is if you're doing multiple layers on layers. So you can see here where we got color white metallic, or we have color metallic white, or if we're doing an underlay, we can do a color on metallic, and so on and so forth. So you've got different options here for this particular Muto and how it can lay down that ink. Let's go to a different machine. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to choose this Roland. Again, we're going to do the same settings. Make sure that the ignore overprint is off. Use printer spot colors. Choose our color mode. So this one has metallic in this case. So let's just say we're going to do metallic silver. Under our mapping, go under driver options. And on this particular machine, settings are a little bit different and they're a lot simpler. So this machine is a little more limited in what it can do. And so my metallic settings are CMYK on metallic. Those are kind of my options. And then I have these again, which I'm going to make sure and match. So in this case, it's only allowing me to do one type of option. So that's what a Roland would look like. Here's a Mamaki. So let's do the same thing. Ignore overprint. Change our color mode. Turn on printer spot colors. Let's do this as varnish and this is white. And then we click on driver options. And then in here, we're going to click on spot settings. So now we can choose what order we want that to be. So color, white color, white color varnish. So we could choose that. Again, these options are going to be the same. And then if you're printing a spot as, you can do that as well. So this is the part that's going to be, you'll need to do a little exploring on, but all these settings are located basically in the same place. You will find them under the driver options tab inside of your software. Now, if you are in, say, the production manager, and let's just go to our Muto here, and we go to the default job properties. They're going to be, the driver options is this tab right here. It's the 4th tab over. So in the production manager, the same options will appear. They're just separated in a different tab. That's all. So if you're importing stuff directly into production manager, you would just use this tab, and then your ink options are down here. So you click on here and you can choose your ink settings right here. So that's the basic essentials of printing white. You first set it up in the software as a Underbase or a Finisher or something like that. And then you make sure that when you come in here, you've got all the correct settings set. Ignore overprint, choose your color mode, and things like that. One of the things that you'll notice is that if I choose a CMYK color here, then I click on my mapping, you don't see your white. So it is important that you hit that. So if you come into this screen and you don't see white, you'll need to make sure and check your color mode. Now, not all profiles have an option for white. So if the profile that you're using doesn't have an option for white, then that would be important for you to get a profile that does. Now, in this case, I'm using no color correction, so I can see all the options. So all the options for this printer are available to me. This is all the options this printer can print. So in your case, though, check your ICC profile. That should help you. And you'll need to find one that has the white enabled in order to do it. So that's the basics on printing white. Then when you go out to print, you just send the job out, and the printer will print. If everything's set correctly, the printer will print the job. What I typically recommend, if this is the first time you've ever done white or varnish, I would not recommend printing off a huge job to start. Many times it's a good idea to kind of get used to the way that it prints and just kind of making sure you've got the process right. Just do something small, do a couple tests, see how it comes out, look at it, say, okay, this is what it's going to do. Maybe you'll find out that maybe one strike on the white is not enough. Maybe you got to do 2 strikes. So doing a little testing before you do something large can potentially save you from wasting a lot of material and ink down the road. So I'm always an encourager of doing some of that testing ahead of time. So do we have any questions on printing white or metallic?
We'll open it up for your questions now. Just go ahead and type them into the chat window on the bottom there. Looks like we do have one that came up during the webinar. Said, can I change the opacity of the underbase depending on the substrate? That's
a good question. So let's take a look here. So if I can apply a transparency to this, although I've not typically messed around with doing it less opaque. Usually, but I would imagine if you put a transparency on this, say of like 50%, then you could get a reduced amount on it. Typically, if you're trying to cover a different color, one pass may not be sufficient, and so that's where adding additional strikes or additional print times would help you cover or increase or decrease your ink saturation, because it's kind of a 100% type thing. But if we do that variable underbase like we did here, so if we go back to our clear and we do our variable underbase, you can tell that we are doing some of that already. So let's effects, separate. So we are, well, what happened? Did it separate? There it is. Okay. It didn't want to move on me. There we go. So you can tell that we are kind of doing some of that already here in this. So portions of it are lighter than another. So yes, you could, by simply applying like a transparency or a blending mode to that particular object. And I would imagine that that's how that would work.
Okay.
Any other questions on this?
Do you have anything else, either about printing white metallics or any other questions you have about Flexi, either design or printing?
Just so you guys know, we do have a document on this as well that kind of shows you step by step. I don't think I can post it in chat. So if you would like it, we have this. Our tech support has access to this as well. So all you would really need to do is, if you want to, and I'll type this out for you guys, or Stuart can actually type it probably in the chat, but esupport@thinksai.com. So if you send in an email to esupport@thinksai.com and you ask them, hey, can you provide me with a document on how to print white? We actually have a 9-page PDF that basically walks you through the same steps that we went through here today. It's a document that I created or helped create with some of these same images in order to get this out to you guys. So we do have something like that available. If this is something you want to walk through and don't want to necessarily watch a video again, we also have this in PDF format. It's really detailed. It walks you through step by step what you need to do to apply a variable underbase, a solid underbase, how to do a finisher as an effect or a spot color, and then what each one of them does, and then some examples and things like that as it walks through. And then it also has a nice screenshot, which is really helpful, that shows you each one of the steps that you want to check inside of the rip and print for printing white. So the ignore overprint, the color mode, the spot colors, and then the driver options button. It's all kind of neatly labeled. And then each step in there in between. So yeah, it's a really good document. So if you guys are interested in that, just send them a message and I will make sure that these guys get that to you. So if you have any questions on printing white, that's it. So as you can tell, it's not too hard. There's a couple little settings you kind of have to be aware of that can kind of throw a wrench in things if you're not careful. That's all.
Okay. And Kelly was just wondering if we're going to send out an email with the link to the webinar, and just wondering if we can attach the PDF to that. So we could do that.
Yeah, actually,
that way everyone has it.
Yeah, Stuart, if you're able to attach that to the email, yeah, I'll send that to you, and we can just have everybody get it. That'll actually work better,
Fantastic.
I think.
Yeah, I think that'll be great. Easy for everyone. And I'm also posting the link to the SAi YouTube channel. If you want to take the time to review any other past webinars we have or other training videos, Aaron's been working on more training and posting those to our YouTube channel. You can see them there. And I think that's everything for today. So we'll go ahead and wrap up. But we will be having our next Flexi webinar on May 19th. So next month, we'll be talking about the basics of creating a color profile. And once again, we'll send out an email for you to register for that webinar as well. And I think that's everything. Thank you so much, everyone, for spending time with us today. And I hope you have a great rest of your week.
All right. You guys have a good one.